I love that story from Ron Rector from our North Campus. And again, he is the inspiration for the theme this year. He emailed me about a year ago and said, we need a series about overcoming. And didn't ask to be on video, didn't ask to tell his story, but we thought it'd be appropriate for him to tell his story. And Gateway is full of stories like that, and we love leading people in that way. We say love everyone life by life, and we want to live that out. So thank you, Ron, for your inspiration. My name's Carlos Ortiz. I'm our senior pastor. I want to welcome everybody to today's Inspire service. If you're here at the North Campus, will you welcome all of our campuses who are watching today and those who are watching online. We're so glad that you're with us. Today is a little bit different. You know, normally in this Voices series, we have somebody come and speak to us. And a few months ago, as I was on the phone talking with our guest speaker today, we were having a conversation. And it was very personal. And the reason why it's personal is because Clinton Allen, our speaker today, was in my very first small group. I was a college student. I had just come to know Jesus. They threw me in to be a small group leader. I didn't know what to do. And they gave me a group of kids that were like 12 years old. And they were awful. And I was awful as a leader. So it matched up really well. And he was part of that first group. And so as we were talking honestly on the phone, you know what? It was his idea. He said, what if we modeled for everybody what it's like to have a life-giving conversation about overcoming? What if instead of me speaking for 30 minutes, we model for people creating space for somebody else to be honest and stepping into a space that somebody has created for us to be honest? So today, we'll see how this goes. We have a few questions planned, and we've talked a little bit, but being one of his mentors in his life, there might be something come up that I'm gonna be like, time out, everybody's watching, let's dive into that. So we'll see how today goes. But today is really an honest conversation, and our goal would be that you would be inspired to up your game if you have somebody close in your life, like a running partner, to up your game of honesty in a group that you attend, or to up your game by getting off the bench of isolation and being in relationship. So on that note, will you help me welcome today's guest, Clinton Allen. Glad you're here, man. So glad you're here.
It is a real joy and honor to be here, and thanks for allowing me to worship with you. I consider it a real gift and an honor to be able to worship with different expressions, different faith communities, and I love your spirit, I love worshiping with you, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I almost introduced you as Portia and Clinton Allen.
Rightfully so.
Because I knew Portia before I knew you, your wife, did your wedding 15 years ago, can you believe that? And honestly, be honest with you, I always think of Portia as Portia Butler, not Portia Allen. Is that offensive?
Yes, it is. No, rightfully so. But her last name, her maiden name was Butler. It's a strong name.
Strong name.
But my last name is Allen, so she moved up on the chart.
Yeah, from B to A.
From B to A.
There you go.
There you go.
You got it. So a fun note, I don't know if you knew this or not, I think you know this. Portia, his wife, her dad was my first boss ever. That's right. And he's a military guy. That's right. And he made me want to quit ministry. And so, but he also was a big encourager. Yeah. And so if he did that to me, I can imagine what he's doing to you as a son-in-law.
Yeah, I'm not afraid at all. I call him the general. The general.
He's the general. So I do want to start off with this, and we've talked about this a little bit. Thinking back almost 30 years ago, and when we're getting older, and you had this 19-year-old kid become your leader, you're 12, 13 years old, and our church was in the hood in Dallas, Oak Cliff, Dallas. You lived across the street from the church. And if we're not careful, a lot of people can look at your life and think you have all the check marks to box somebody in. Sure. Single mom, poor black kid in the hood. And you think about that era, and we're gonna dive into that here in a second. What do you think about looking back on that middle school kid? What would you say to him? What do you think about him?
Yeah, first of all, I guess I would say that, I am confident to say that I'm thankful that God sent you. I love how you introed this, that I was this 19-year-old kid trying to figure it out how to be a leader, how to be a servant myself while I'm serving these middle school students. But in actuality, we looked up to him because he was further along the journey, the faith journey, life journey than we were, but close enough to where we could aspire to be like him. Whether he had it all figured out or not, we were like, I want to be like Carlos. And so I'm thankful that God sent you. But looking back on that season, I look back on it with fond memories. I look back on it with, I love the dichotomy of like blissful ignorance that I think I had at that time. I wrestled with identity. I wrestled with insecurity. But at the same time, I was this confident little kid. But it was that dichotomy. It was that duality, if you will, of, man, I come from certain circumstances and hardships, but I'm surrounded. God has given me men of God to aspire to be like. I feel like the local church saved my life because it kept me from situations and certain pockets of trouble that I could have found.
Let's pause real quick, because so I spent a lot of time with your grandmother.
Yeah.
So that sounds weird, I know. I spent a lot of time with your grandma. But because she was the prayer warrior of our church.
Yeah.
And every Tuesday, we'd have prayer meeting. She was the first one there and the last one to leave. And you could hear her above everybody else praying. So you had a grandmother, you have a mother who's a fighter, love your mom. So as a teenager, talk about the importance that a parent, even a single parent, right, especially a single parent, had in your journey, thinking back those years.
I think the two strongest entities in my life were the Spirit of God and a strong mama that I had. And as you mentioned, my praying grandmother. She had a lot of gifts, and probably one of them was like the weird fashion sense that I get from her. I shot these boots myself, by the way. But she was an intercessor. And I remember, as Pastor Carlos talks about Tuesday morning prayers, and hearing her, I can remember waking up 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. For 20 years, she had a prayer group over the phone that, faithfully 5:30, 6 a.m., whatever it was, for the first hour and a half, I can just hear her on the phone in a room, just crying out to God for her grandchildren, for her own kids, for her neighbors, for her circle, her community. And so when you're immersed in that type of culture and environment, you can only run from God so far before it really gets a hold of you. And eventually, because of the prayers of my grandmother, because of the faithfulness of my mom, and even the return to Christ that my father had, I think that helped shape and form the foundation of Christ that I found myself having at an early age. But I think the key was being able to have my own relationship with Christ. And it wasn't my mom's or my grandmother's, but it was my faith. It wasn't Carlos's, it wasn't my youth pastor, it was mine. And so that was the journey.
That's good. We talk about this a lot. I know it's really important to your wife, Portia, and to a lot of people. As we talk about some of these check marks that people could define you in and box you in. A lot of people you grew up with did grow up in the same neighborhood, same circumstances. Lives turned out very different. How did you not allow whatever circumstances you had to define you?
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I think that I started to say this. I'll go ahead and say it. What's that idiom? What's that saying that says you can take the girl out the country, but you can't take the country out the girl, or whatever fill in the blank that is? I believe, obviously, that there's a principle that rings true, but I don't think I wholeheartedly submitted to that situation, because even though I was nurtured and informed by my circumstances, I just refused to let it define who I was. And because I was surrounded with godly people that helped remind me, and I had to remind my soul of who I am and whose I am. And so I think I was just fortunate enough to have godly people in my life that held me to a certain standard, that held me accountable to my actions, and helped remind me that I do not have to be defined by my circumstance, that my outcome isn't determined by the situation that I currently find myself in. And so I also credit, that's the supernatural, but I also credit my mom, who really busted her tail to give us the best education, the best books, the best experiences. She exposed us to affluent neighborhoods to aspire to have. She worked really hard so that we could have vacations and missions trips. And so it was the culmination of all of that I really am thankful for, that helped shape my character and my spiritual formation.
So here's what I'm hearing you say. I'm hearing you say that you didn't do it by yourself.
Oh, certainly not.
So you have a lot of people around you, family leaders,
right,
pastors, help and remind you who you are in Christ. Okay, so now let's fast forward to your dad.
Yeah.
You have 3 boys. You married Portia, and even though you're 2 beautiful black people, you grew up very different.
Yeah, right.
And just like any other people would, right?
Right.
Whether you're white, Asian, brown, whatever it is, it's not really defined by color. It's really about you had a different set of situations and circumstances along with ethnicity. Now you're a parent. Flip the switch a little bit. What are the barriers you and Portia are having to overcome to raise kids today, almost 30 years later?
Wow, that's really good. I should have my wife speak to this, but she's much smarter. I think that one of the natural hurdles that we found was me coming from what I may call an incomplete home, and Portia coming from a more traditional, thank you, more traditional family setting. I think that there were some assumptions made and some apprehensions that we had to let go of, or let our guard down for, that I felt like I carried a lot of baggage into our relationship because I felt like I came from a untraditional home, a broken home, or incomplete. And I think for quite a while, I think I was paralyzed by fear of failing. I felt like maybe I would turn out like my parents' marriage. And so I think I sabotaged serious relationships when they got to a certain point.
Let me stop you real quick, because just knowing your story, this is where we're going to go off script a little bit. And so there's things we've talked about, even about what it meant for you to be in duality with church and school and family, the neighborhood, how your mom wanted you to be better than your circumstance. And so talk about, even though this isn't necessarily everybody, we have a lot of people in our church, what did blackness mean for you? What was that tension for you? Because that's some of the things that are underlying here for you.
That's good. I can tell you right off the bat that one of the things that I wrestle with when you're in middle school, I think that's one of the most insecure times of your life. And I can tell you at that time, thinking back on that, I shared with Pastor Carlos earlier that I sometimes felt, and I'm going to be vulnerable with you guys, I think that there were times where I felt, oh man, I have to put my blackness on display for my family or my neighborhood or for my school. And meanwhile, feeling like, oh, am I too ethnic for my white friends or my church friends or my more affluent friends? And so that wrestle there even caused this duality we spoke of, wrestling with just perpetuating insecurity of thinking that I had to be this person for this sect, this person for this set of people. And
we all deal with that.
We all do it.
We all deal with some sort of vacillating between one thing and another, as opposed to living one solid
100%.
life. Okay, so let's go back to what you were saying. So you're vacillating between who you are, your upbringing, your insecurities. You're bringing that to the table as a parent, married to somebody who maybe had a little bit more stability. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Again, go back to what are the tensions you're facing now as parents?
One practical one is even the approach that we have to finances. I got amen. Here's how this play out though, which may be a little different than what you might assume. I think that because my wife came from, they were by no means rich, but she had a fairly comfortable life. She had all of her needs met, including college and being set in life and all this. Me coming from a not secure financial situation, where some seasons we felt like we had to scratch and claw for everything. I find that I don't take our financial security in certain seasons serious enough, where my wife finds a lot of security in it, and in the absence of it, anxiety. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But for me, I think that if I'm not careful, I don't take it serious enough, I don't steward it enough, I cause a reflex in her. But for me, it's like, I grew up knowing that like my mom, before any preacher, taught me the principle of tithing or first fruits, of Malachi 3. Like, before any preacher taught me that, my mom taught me how to prioritize giving to God first. And so before she even, some seasons, paid any bills, she would give her first fruit, her tithe. And then I'd be like, Mom, I just heard you talk to my grandma about we don't even know how we're gonna keep the bills paid this month. But somehow, some way, a check would show up in the mail, groceries would show up on our front step. And so that was how I lived. And so for me, if I'm not careful, I can use that as a crutch to not be more fiscally responsible. You know, to go, well, God will provide. But there's a carelessness to that as well. So very practical.
And then the other side for Portia is you can get comfortable.
Correct.
And maybe not step out maybe as much.
Yeah, or not trust as much that God is gonna come through or provide.
Yeah.
When I'm like, that's God's track record for me. That's his history. I know he'll show up. I know he's gonna provide. And she's like, yep, I believe that too, but also we gotta stop being stupid.
Yeah, that's good. So I wanted to turn the corner a little bit. It's talking about your boys, and you're raising three beautiful boys, and I love the way you guys lead them. We're in a tumultuous year. Yeah. I think we're saying that every year nowadays, but it is an election year, and we're not going to go into the politics, but we're going to talk about the tensions that rise up. Right. And I want to ask you a question that, because I want us to go back a little bit, 4 years. Yeah. And you and Portia were right in the middle, because you were living in Minneapolis. You were literally in the middle of everything happening with the George Floyd eruption and what happened with his death and the subsequent things that came out of that. And we here in Texas or around the country, or around the world, have a perception, because it's filtered through the television. Right. You two were in the church, on the front row, in the situation, and trying to navigate that with your children. As all of us with grandchildren or children or nieces and nephews or kids in our classrooms are trying to navigate the tensions of the world. I won't ask you a specific question other than, what are some things that we don't know about being in a situation like that, that you learned so that you could guide your kids through that tension and the people around you through that tension that maybe we wouldn't know on the outside?
That's really good how you frame that. My wife and I were on staff at a great church in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. And I was born and raised in Dallas, as Carlos mentioned, and my wife's an Army brat. She lived all over the place, but they call Texas home because that's where they've been the longest. But we had 11 years where God felt we were on assignment to help this beautiful church out in Minneapolis, to help build culture and lead there. And as Carlos mentioned, we were on, the George Floyd situation. That obviously it went just not national, but internationally, and we were all kind of faced with it. Happened during COVID, of course, and so there was no looking away. You had all of our face. We were inundated with it. And so to your question, I think some of the lessons that we learned, that we found, is that there is a difference. If I can go here, there is a difference between peaceful protesters, opportunists, and rioters. There is a difference. I think the second thing that we learned, I don't have to elaborate. If you need me to, I can. I think the second thing, so don't believe all that you see on TV. I think the second thing that we learned is that people come together. This is not going to be a secret to you, but I think that people come together in crisis. We saw that with 9/11. We saw that with George Floyd. We saw that with anytime people, not just even our nation, but I believe that intrinsically there are more good people than there are bad. And I think one of the most valuable lessons that we found in that season was that people would rise to the occasion and that the church was the church during that time. We, in unity, didn't matter about denomination, didn't matter about ethnicity, background. We all came together to clean up the streets and to salvage souls, as well as salvage the streets, salvage neighborhoods, salvage businesses. And to me, it really was a beautiful time. God really brought beauty out of the ashes because quite literally, people were trying to burn the city down. And I think the last thing that I would attribute to that season was to reinforce that my faith isn't predicated on any political party or affiliation. That doesn't dismiss my responsibility or obligation to participate because we're all grateful for this nation that we get to be a part of, that God allowed us to be born here. But my faith isn't predicated on the left or the right. My faith isn't on some political affiliation or government. It's in the kingdom. That's wholeheartedly what I believe.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it gives us perspective. Yeah, it gives perspective. So you are a creative through and through. I don't know if you may not know this, but if you ever follow him on social media, like every day he's trying to figure out what underwear am I going to wear? What socks am I going to wear? What hat am I going to wear?
Wow.
Am I lying?
You really dumbed that down, didn't you?
I know. But as a creative, and then we're in a city of creatives, a city where people love to express who they are. And what I love about Austin, the greater Austin area, is that people also want to express themselves in how they care for people. Right. We're a very caring city. We want to take care of people. And so it's really easy for people to come here and want to be who they are. But I'll say this about our city, and I have a question I want to throw at the end of that, and that is, we have a city that's looking more and more like our world, right? Whether it's people who are American, whether it's through immigration, whether it's through refugees, people of skin color, ethnicities, food, language, all of it. And what I love about our church is that we're growing to look more like our city, right? Yeah. What would you say to people, both who maybe walk into a room and feel like, oh, these people don't look like me, right? Is this a place for me? Because I know you care about that. And what would you say to those really wanting to be part of a faith community that looks like you said, the kingdom of God, looks like heaven? What would you say to those groups of people?
That's always an important question, in my opinion. I think that the first thought that comes to mind is I really want to applaud not just Carlos and the leadership here, but you all who make the church the church. Yeah. Thank you for being open to reflect the community that you live in. I think that's really important for a local body, a local church, to reflect the community and the streets that they occupy. And so I come to this beautiful faith community of Gateway, Austin, and I just see this beautiful representation of the kingdom. And so I want to thank you for embracing that. I think there's one thing to be open to diversity, and there's another thing to be intentional about it. And I feel like you're intentional about it. Your leadership here I feel like it's intentional. And I believe that diversity goes beyond ethnicity and skin color. It's ideals, thoughts. So you all, similar to the culture of Austin, because I love this city, feels like embraces everyone and breaks down the barrier, Carlos, of you have to have all of your stuff together to come to Christ or to come to Gateway Austin. You don't have to have anything together. You come here, and it's in community and through the Spirit of God that you get to have it together, whatever that looks like. So I'm thankful for you guys, a community like this. I think that, to answer your question, I think that you have to, there's an onus on both parties. I just gave gratitude to you all for the part that you're playing, and then there's an onus on me as the attender also to have an open heart and open mind to say, let me get out of my comfort. Let me go past the place of complacency for me to experience a different culture, a different atmosphere.
And that's not even just in your church. It's like in your neighborhood. It's everywhere you go, right? That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And so I think that if we're going to reflect, if you subscribe to the principle of trying to make it as on earth as it is in heaven to some degree, then I do believe that takes some stepping out of the boat and out of the comfort zone on both parties.
Yeah, that's good. So I like, that's a great segue to stepping out of the boat. So I want to tap into your pastor's heart real quick, as you've led people, you've led in worship, you've led a lot of people over the years, and you're a great worship leader. You're going to lead our church, all of our campuses. He's going to lead us in a song here in a little bit, our time of reflection. But what role does worship have in overcoming barriers and obstacles we face throughout our lives? Why worship? Sometimes we withhold worship as we go through difficult things. Why, lead us for a second, why should we worship in the midst of facing obstacles?
I think that worship is another powerful form of surrender. And I think it is a natural inclination for us to be guarded and to feel like we do this out of nobility, I think, thinking that, man, whatever struggle we have or whatever hardship we face, I think it'll be me and God, and it's hard for me to let other people in, and even sometimes to let God in. But I think that when we get over the illusion of control, because it's just an illusion anyway, we don't really have control,
right?
And enter into worship, it may sound like I'm trying to sell you a bill of goods, but I really believe in this, that worship unlocks, to me, it unlocks the supernatural. When you, and in the natural, I believe that worshiping takes the attention and the focus off of our circumstance and puts it on the one who's in control of our circumstances anyway. And so I believe that we use worship or prayer and intercession as a last resort. Like, oh man, I've tried everything. I guess I should pray. I've tried everything. I guess I should worship. I think that needs to be the first thing that we run to instead of the last thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why worship to me is a very powerful and underutilized weapon that we have.
Yeah, so as you talk about that, one of the things that comes to my mind is sometimes we think of worship as a style of song, a style of music. As I get a little older, I miss some songs from 20 years ago, right? And my parents are like, this song we used to sing in the 60s, I miss that, you know? It's like, I think it's normal for us to have that, but that's not what you're talking about when it comes to worship. So here's my question. Not trying to trigger you or anything, but I wrote this down. How have creatives, like yourself, how have creatives and worship leaders both enhanced the church and Sunday worship experience? And where have creatives done damage to the worship experience on a Sunday?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that art and creativity are important to God. I do believe that. I believe that creativity was given to us, creatives or anybody alike, by the Creator. I intrinsically believe that every one of us have an element, an arbitrary level of creativity in us, whether you're writing a song or writing a spreadsheet. And so I do believe that God has given us creativity, given us art to appreciate and to glorify Him. I also believe, the second part of your question, that creatives in particular, even though none of us are absolved from the feelings of imposter syndrome, I do believe that creatives in particular are can be prone to be emotionally melancholy, emotionally
Sad. You say sad.
Yeah. Just emotive. And I think that it's, when we're not careful, it has, I think creatives, we have perpetuated this, it's about me worship culture. So a lot of our songs of the last, I don't know, maybe I'll say the last decade have been way more me focused than giving attributes to God and his character and who he is. And so I feel like we're seeing a return to that. But I think there was a good stretch where creatives, even though God-given, and they push the boundaries of what church and creativity can go, I think that we also, like pros and cons of anything, also brought in with us this culture of lament and like, woe is me. And
there's a place for lament.
There's a place for lament. There's a book in the Bible called Lamentations. But if we can pivot and swing the pendulum back to after we are real and transparent about our struggles and lament, that we can then get back to, but this is who God is. This is the attributes and the character of God, and this is who he is in spite of my circumstances and no matter how I feel, because even though I'm a feeler, you should be informed by your feelings, not led by them. And so,
Say that again. I like that. We should be what?
As a feeler, feelings are important to me and to all of us because God has wired us that way, to have emotions and to have feelings. He's not afraid of our feelings. He's not afraid of when we're upset. I mean, you ever got upset at your dad? He forgave you, you forgave him. He's not afraid of the emotions that he's given us, but we have to be informed by our feelings, sure, but not led by them.
That's good. So one of the things I wanted to do because you're gonna sing for us. That's one of the things that you did want to do, is kind of lead our whole church. And I'm glad everybody at Gateway is going to be led by you as a time of reflection. We do this quite often, but I wonder, for many of us who attend Gateway regularly, in these times of reflection, do we take advantage of the time to sit and just be and hear the song, have it as a form of prayer? So here's what I want you to do. We preach that everybody's wonderfully made by God, right? That we were knit together in our mother's womb, that God begins to breathe life into us, right, at that time and begin to knit us together. And so one of the things I want to ask you is, outside of being married to Portia, outside of having 3 kids, outside of the local church and worship and creativity, who is Jesus to you as an individual, as a man? Who is Jesus to you?
Wow, that's a profound and dense question to ask, Carlos. But outside of, I'm gonna give you the cliche answer that you might hear from a Christ follower. Jesus is everything to me, and I really mean that. But also, Jesus is the ultimate example to follow for me, the person of character that I strive to be, the person of integrity that I want to exemplify and exercise. Jesus is the ultimate example of surrender, because he surrendered to the Father, even though they were one and the same. He still understood the principle of spiritual authority, understood deeper than anyone the principle of servanthood, and not seeking a platform. And I think in the world that I live in and occupy, being on stages and platforms, it's easy to glamorize this and forget that to keep the main thing, is that it's to love Jesus and to live, walk, love, and talk like Jesus, and to serve people the way he did. And so for me, I'll say in the natural, Jesus is the ultimate example of how to live and how to love people. And so, yes, Jesus is everything to me. And
I've heard you say, because of that, you're rooted in him.
Correct.
You're rooted in him. So we're going to go a time of reflection. And we've talked about multiple things today. This is just a conversation. And I wonder how many of you are thinking, man, this is what my friends and I do, or this is what my running partner and I do. This is what we do in my community group, or my group that I meet with. And then there might be some of us who are having a moment where we're saying, I don't have a space like this. I don't have a relationship, to have honest conversations like this, and it's inspiring me to take a next step. And yet, even though we want you to have that, we want you to have a community of people that you do life with, it's what Clinton said, this is really the core, and it is our foundation in Christ. Those of us exploring faith, so glad you're here, so glad that you trust us with this journey of figuring out who Jesus is, and yet at the same time, God uses people in our lives to be a reflection of him. It comes in relationship. And yet, no matter how many relationships have, no matter how many groups we're in or how you serve people, how good or how bad your life is, our foundation, our hope is rooted in Christ. So as Clinton sings this song, will you just posture yourself in a way to just listen, whether it's closing your eyes, sitting up straight, whatever you need to do, and let's just enter into a time of reflection as he leads us.